a start. There's a few empty chairs. There's a weird void in the middle here. Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for coming. Great to have you here. You're very welcome in this space, however you're feeling and whatever days and weeks you've had. So thanks for being here. So we're in the Museum of Bath at work. So kindly provided by Stuart, so thanks for that. Toilets are downstairs, out to the right there. Fire exit is there. There's heating that's not on at the moment, but can be on if you're getting chilly. So yeah, welcome. So we're going to do, the session today is about exploring this kind of bioregional food concept. Very introductory, kind of exploratory. It's in its kind of early seedling phases. And for the many growers in here, you know that when you sort of put the seedling first in the ground, it's sort of a mix of excitement and hopeful and also apprehension, because there's going to be all these things it's going to have to contend with. So great to see lots of growers here as well. Just to get a feel for who's in the room, can you just put your hand up if you're from Bath or living in Bath at the moment? And then in Bristol, anyone? Anywhere else want to shout out? Bahamas? Kensho? Right. Cool, great. Lovely. Well, thanks all for coming. And who's like a grower in the room, or like involved in growing, or yeah. Great, wow, cool. Who's involved in like food organisations, or the more kind of other side of food? Yeah, lots of people doing both. Cool. Right. Who eats? So the relationship to food. Okay, cool. So yeah, we'll just take a short minute just to arrive in the room as well. Partly for myself, just to like land here, and then we'll go into the concept. So if you want to invite you to just close your eyes. Yeah, just sort of settle into the room after your day with all the wind and the rain and the elements. And just take a deep breath in. And just breathe out any tension or things from the day. And then just take a few more deep breaths at your own pace. And just really sort of feel into the reason why you're here, if there is one. And just with your intention for this session. And then just come back into the room when you're ready, and we'll see what emerges from that space. Welcome if you're just coming in. Okay, so session today is going to sort of take two parts. So the first part will be me kind of presenting this basically. So sorry for that, just talking for a bit. But the main part is the second session, so we'll kind of split into groups around the three main projects. So we've got these kind of branches, or these themes around We Are Avon, with like Avon producers, land access, land trust issues, and also the land worker side, so that's more the advocacy and training, so anyone interested in that. So we'll kind of just split into those groups, and also any other groups that people are interested in, and then we'll kind of discuss and try and like refine both like this vision and also what people want to bring to it, or any ideas or input or feedback. So that'll be the second half to kind of like propel this kind of bioregional food movement forward in whatever way that feels right. So I'm going to start with the roots and a bit of why we're here and why we got to it. So We Are Avon is sort of defined here as an emerging web of active producers, farms, organisations and diverse communities collaborating to build better local food systems for all. It's a grassroots movement to provide healthy and affordable food resilience for this region of Avon, whilst also regenerating and diversifying the land and water of the Avon catchment area. So lots in there we're going to dig into. But the key thing is it's really like, it's a kind of action-orientated web as well as the kind of current vision for it. It's it's about these kind of three action branches where we really take action to kind of transform these current crises into holistic solutions. And a bit on the roots of this project. So a bit of sort of where the seeds of this project have come from. So many of you'll be familiar with those because we sort of lots of people in this room have really been part of those seeds of kind of, whether it's kind of all the kind of past groups and past efforts that have gone on to kind of like make this food transition work possible, and to make this space where we can transform those food systems, looking at Lynn and people that have kind of done so much in this in the past, and also the people that are growing on the day-to-day now, and the people that are involved in that food movement right now. And I'm also going to look at why the soil conditions are right for this to emerge now. So I believe it's like a really unique time at the moment where it's actually got much more potential for this to really take hold. And also looking at kind of what is the potential of taking this more regional lens, looking at food, and of this taking this collaborative lens as well. So we'll get into that. So the first route is into this sort of We Are Avon project. Is kind of I won't get too much into it because I think people are quite aware, but the current unsustainability of our food systems, one of the main contributors to climate change, biodiversity loss, etc. Not really serving anyone because it's overfeeding 1 billion people whilst 1 billion people go hungry. That's the more global context. And regionally, it's not too different. We've got huge inequalities. Second route is really from lived experience, so being immersed in growing projects with middle ground growers, with loads of other projects around here, and kind of living those experiences of those barriers to the emergence of these systems. Route 3, so already mentioned, like learning from the successes of what's already gone, and learning from the challenges with previous local food action. And the fourth route is really important. It's about the hope and the vision of this bioregion coming back to life. So that's really the broad vision, is imagining this Avon bioregion, which we'll define in a minute, regenerating. So go back to sort of definition as well at the start. It's really about regenerating the lands and waters of this area as well. So it's really centred upon these things we depend on. And actually, how can food be a concept to bring everyone together around that to actually regenerate this landscape and catchment area as well. There we go. Okay. So it's a sort of a more concise thing of what We Are Avon is about. So it's a deep and meaningful, a deep and impactful collaboration between communities and nature within the Avon bioregion to transform these conversion crises into transformative solutions and community resilience. Hello, Guy. This is taking a regional approach, so it's slightly different sort of things that have gone before that might have looked at the local, at the Bath or the city level, or big national frameworks that kind of miss out the local. It's really basing this project and this identity and this story and narrative around this bioregion. So broadly defined, Paul will notice this slide because I've stolen it from him. But this is the Avon catchment area. So it's 554,000 acres. It's got 19 towns, 2 cities, Bath and Bristol. Largely centred upon the Bristol Avon, which runs. Got a little late down there. Kind of along here somewhere. Specific river knowledge. I've watched most of it. This is kind of the whole, and then we're going to zoom into kind of the details within that. And I think I want to kind of start this work with kind of the seeds of where it came from within me as well, which is about this story of place, and also largely inspired by the kind of bioregional group around here that there are many people here involved in, for kind of developing the story of place of Avon bioregion. And there are lots of stories of place. We're really focusing on the emerging stories of place, but there are also ancient stories of place that relate to our deep roots in, I would say Celtic and Druidic roots. There are older stories of place, of Bath as this, sacred water city, and not just limited to Bath, but that's one example. Market garden towns dotting the Avon Valley, food sufficient, abundant orchards, largely wooded, if you look at the landscape history as well. Largely wooded valley previously, not sort of as it looks today. And then there's the dominant stories of place of kind of, Roman colonisation, industrial era, modernisation, and then kind of what we currently see of the kind of like financialised place. So we've got this place that is largely, Southgate Shopping Centre example, just of a financialised place. Very different to our kind of both ancient and old stories of place. But then there are these emerging stories of place, which we're trying to bridge, and that's looking at, what we reimagine this place of Avon Bioregion as one that is coming back to life and that is modelling that regeneration at a regional level. And that includes the relocalisation of food systems, circular economies of care, etc., lots of things people in the room are already working on. So that's kind of rooting this work in stories and narrative. I don't know if does Paul or Nick or anyone want to say more on that, on kind of like Avon, the sort of Avon Bioregion group work and the kind of stories of place. Where does this come from?
I can say something that is non-conceptual because you're covering that very well. I think for me it's feeling in our bodies the presence of this amazing river that we've got and all its waters that supply it and feed it and have their own trajectories towards it, but to feel them as a whole, creating the region that we have here, which has got its unique qualities that Hamish is telling us about, and it's ancient, and the senses we have that everything will flow if the river flows. That's all I'll add.
Cool, thanks for that, that's great. Yeah,
Go
for a minute.
One of the things that's an undercurrent for me is the enormous social injustice of the moment and the movement towards just a greater fairness in everything.
Yeah, and that's a good emerging story of place.
Yeah.
Transforming what we've got.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Anyone else? I guess it sort of comes back to relationship to place as well. So whether we sort of feel like we've entered that relationship or not, we have a relationship to place. So. Okay, so moving from the kind of story and narrative in context, we're going to go into the kind of nuts and bolts of this kind of project proposal. As I said, it's kind of come from these like roots of both loving this place and relationship to place, and being deeply immersed in the food systems of this place, of the land of this place. So I can't see on there. And so that's kind of some of the roots, and then so we're going to look into kind of the project proposal and its vision and its kind of core pillars and what the kind of action branches proposed are, and then kind of try and sort of refine them or rewrite them with you guys later on, and look at kind of what sort of collaboration is required of us, what sort of stepping out of our comfort zones and linking up with the kind of regional and the bigger picture stuff, what's required to make that happen, and then a bit of specifics on sort of, well, not specifics because they're very draft early forms, but looking at kind of what actually then makes this happen. So I want this to be very like much action orientated rather than just in the kind of conceptual. So a bit of an overview and context. So some key aims. There are many more, I guess, because the idea is this is quite broad ranging and not just coming from one project, from a whole collaboration. So it's really to work across those boundaries, to create this regenerative regional food system, to build on the work that's already there, to build on the projects that are already going on. And that includes these project branches we've discussed, of the Land Trust, the Producer Cooperative, Food Hub, looking at actually physically securing and regenerating land so it can be accessed by a greater diversity of people, so it can actually, they've got a context of right to roam movement and actually much more awareness of commons and new entrant farmers going into land as well. Training is a big part of this because we can have all this land access, but without the trained growers and the kind of regenerative practices and the knowledge, it's not going to go very far. And livelihoods comes into it. This might include creating an incubator training farm for the region as well, which every region should have, but there are very good models of, but that sort of falls under the land workers branch in this proposal. Mentioned the producers cooperative, so that's really about the on the ground kind of linking up producers and linking up hopefully a growing number of producers in this region so we can actually supply collaboratively much more effectively, so sharing resources, etc. And that might come into a physical food hub as well for the Bath and Avon region, so somewhere where you can actually physically centralise this work. And it's also going to overlap with working with kind of the regional food policy. So there's been a Baines food strategy that sort of stopped in 2017 and not had much momentum since. So one of the core aims will be actually looking at also just re-engaging that. So we've already started some discussions with the council around that, but it's going to be really to pick up where people have left off with trying to get this more front and central, because we need that to actually facilitate all this work to take place. Because if we're working with kind of age-old planning systems and policies, then we're actually just going to come up against brick walls every time we take these actions. So that's why it has to be broad ranging, and it can't just be a simple, unambitious one aim. And it's also to create, this is actually a really important part for me, and there's a lot of part of the route, is to create this kind of regional model for a much broader regeneration and bioregional movement. So it's really coming from that broader bioregional perspective of these kind of like, healing biotopes, regenerative places, regions coming back to life, and communities re-engaging with the lands there. And hopefully that can also catalyse these models to kind of be then applied in their own context in other areas, which is already happening, and we've already learned from places like Tamar Grow Local, so I'm chatting to Simon who set up that, and places that have kind of already pioneered this, so it's already part of this wider movement, but it's to create our own model and try and lead in it here as well. Oh, keep clicking the wrong button. So looking at where do these branches of action come from, because it's all very well sort of putting the models out, but really they're sort of rooted in 3 community needs, and part of this again has come from the research from the Baines food strategy. So it had a lot of research into kind of culture around food, access to food, all these things, and from that and from our own experiences in this work, we've sort of re-identified these key needs of like a requirement for local, affordable, healthy food for everyone that doesn't come to a huge cost to earth and to the waters and to the lands in this bioregion, and sort of link up that with the branch of action. The producers cooperative is one way to address that community need. Secondly, this kind of need for purposeful livelihoods, for like real secure livelihoods, training, opportunities to pursue this really healthy choice and see it as a really viable thing for young people to go into and to be excited about, and to be like, oh, what are you doing after A-levels? Oh, I'm going to do a land apprenticeship, or we're going to do permaculture design, not like just engineering. Engineering's great, but and thirdly, the sort of need for greater access to and connection with the land around us, and that includes for a variety of uses, not just for production of food, but actually that's got to be intertwined with all sorts of other things: community growing, livelihoods, leisure, access to nature, access to walks, stewardship, and just access for a greater diversity of people. So there the land trust comes in. So that's kind of where these branches come together. And the reason for those 3 all kind of being simultaneously woven into one project proposal is because the theory of change behind this is we kind of need all of those cogs to be in motion, otherwise you'll be moving one cog, which a lot of us have been trying to do in the room, and then you'll just hit that cog against things and it won't carry on moving the system's change. So for example, we could have a really good producer's side, we could be producing most of our food really well and things like that, but then if we're not actually then training new growers or creating access to land, or having a sort of a producer's cooperative to link those people together, then it's not going to kind of function. And if we don't have the land workers side of the kind of the advocacy and the link to the wider systems and policy and the training, then none of this will be able to emerge at the rate it does, or at least it will rely on people, fighting up against all these barriers all the time and losing hope. So a bit on context, I won't touch too much on this because I think people in the room are fairly aware, but we're reaching these global tipping points. There's still a climate emergency, even though it seems to have died down on the narrative. Most of those emissions, or at least the biggest sector of those emissions, is coming from land in our industrial sort of productivist paradigm of how we approach land and water. Fewer than 50 harvests left, that was 8 years ago. That's an oversimplified figure, but it's And then we've got this social injustice as well that Lynn mentioned, of actually there's a unequal distribution of this low quality commodity food, which means that many people go hungry and many people are unhealthily overweight or not nourished with real food, even if might get all the nutrients they need. And on the other side of the coin, this food and land transformation is probably the greatest hope and the greatest sort of potential we have for actually transforming these systems. This is taken from the Baines local food strategy, and it just highlights some of these issues, but it's quite interesting because it links it to this regional context. So it's not for Avon, but it's for Bath and North East Somerset, which covers a good area of Avon. So I mentioned sort of the health inequalities, and the cost of just one of those health inequalities is about 50 million just for the cost to the NHS in Baines for, you know, cost of treating just one of these health issues. So 1% of that cost put into regional food transformation, that's like more than the budget required for this sort of project. That's $500,000. It's like that could transform food systems. So looking at that, looking from an economic perspective, it makes a lot of economic sense to reduce those things through this. But I think a lot of you are sort of aware of these things, so I'll sort of rattle through. But this is an interesting one that 81% of people in Baines stated they were willing to buy more locally produced food to reduce carbon emissions. So there's appetite for it, and I'd say there's more appetite for it now than there was in 2009. Much more awareness about it. And yeah, looking at land use more broadly in Baines, vast majority of land is in agricultural use, so it kind of reflects the national and global picture. You know, there's very little wild land left, and a lot is in agricultural use in some form or another. That doesn't mean it's actually growing food for people. In fact, we still import like at least 95% of our food, and yet 70% of Baines' land is in land use, so it's a farming system. And livelihoods and employment has dropped by more than 50% in 10 years, 2000 to 2010. It's probably dropped a similar amount in the last 12 years. And then bringing this sort of into the regional context, it wasn't that long ago that Bath was largely largely food sufficient, in fresh food at least. Wasn't that long ago, there's market gardens dotting the city, orchards, abundant cider production and local food production, community growing. So the message there is that change happens really quickly, and that can be reversed really quickly as well. So any questions or comments or things to add at that point before we go into kind of going forwards?
Just going to say, the council I think has got a follow-on report from that. Are you in touch with Millie Carmichael?
Yes, yeah.
Because I think there's a bit more, you know, she'll be providing with more up-to-date stuff.
Yeah, I think the general trend is it's got worse, or like got all of those figures have carried on. I sort of had a quick glance at it, but yeah, it's.
But it's not as if there's no.
Yeah.
Being,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I should just be clear on one of the councillors.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. So on to the vision. So yeah, I guess the broad frame for this is that we, even in this kind of like difficult time to vision and to dream big of these alternatives, it's actually really what we need is to have those big, bold visions and actually let that guide us through and prefigure that reality. And it's also got to be balanced with pragmatism and what we can do together in the now. To enliven hope and spark action. So the broad vision of We Are Avon is reimagining this bioregion that is coming back to life, returning to hands of community custodianship in this real web of symbiotic relationships, not just between people, but between people and place, and producers and food organisations and communities that need more access to the land. And this is not just about shifting the region's food supply towards local or self-sufficient, but actually also looking to transfer our connection and transfer our belonging, and from that this work will actually be sustained. And it's really about identities as well, so identities as, you know, from consumers to citizens of place, or, you know, bioregional regenerators, shifting that kind of lens of how we perceive ourselves in this place. And yeah, as I said, this broader vision is to inspire this kind of web of bioregional regenerative movements and sub-movements and everything like that across the UK that can together kind of model the transformations of these agricultural systems.
Maybe just one thing to add, maybe?
Yeah.
Just building what the councillor was saying, that maybe that it's also lifting up the potential of people who are already working in this space to serve, you know, the wider reconnection to the source of ground of all of our well-being, which is the land, through eating food, right? Growing, eating, consuming, and so on, sharing.
Yeah, great.
So inclusive of,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, enabling what's already going on to flourish more and to not have so many barriers and to be voiced more and shouted about. Yeah, absolutely. So underlying this kind of proposal of how we actually enact these systems, how we actually manifest this vision, is this kind of theory of change, which needs lots of refining, but it's really based on these three essential cogs for transformation. It's land, people, and collaboration. It also takes this kind of prefigurative approach, so it's looking at this, you know, in a new moment for climate activism and for activism and work in general, I believe. We've got to, like, the oppositional stuff is all still necessary and we need to be doing that, and I'm so grateful it's happening, but now at this very late stage we need to also be prefiguring and creating alternatives and actually modelling the new. Just got to get going on it and not wait for government to act and things like that, so that's why it's got to be grassroots. So the theory of change is about kind of creating and modelling this new in the shell of the old, going beyond just the oppositional or kind of technological or reductionist approaches, and actually having a much more coherent, transformative and diverse tapestry of collective action, to realise this through this kind of bioregional concept. So we'll get a bit more into these kind of cogs in just a moment, and then we'll go into some groups. So just while I'm sort of outlining a bit of detail about these three cogs, just have a think of, like, if any one of these kind of feels drawn to you, or if you're already engaged in work within it, or have something to offer from that, or if there are maybe other cogs or miniature part of these, or other things that you'd like to kind of bring to the table. And then we'll split up into the kind of three groups and discussion section. So the first action branch is really about the producers, so it's really important for me, so learning from other movements similar to this. Some of the learnings from that has been that if it's not led by the farmers or the land workers or the people that are actually, you know, directly affecting and being involved in this change, then it'll be probably short-lived. So I've talked to lots of similar projects and movements in Bristol and other areas, and they've said, yeah, if you can engage and it can be led from the land workers and the growers from the start, and the producers, and a growing number of those producers to bring more people into that picture, and including community producers and allotmenteers and everything like that, then it's much more likely for that theory of change to be successful. So the idea for the producers cooperative branch is really to link together small-scale growers and producers to give them greater collective voice, greater livelihood security, greater access to markets, to communities, to people. So at the moment we all operate, you know, there is lots of collaboration and crossover and pollination, but we largely operate from individual projects, businesses, farms and things like that, and then we feed in and we do our own marketing, we do our own connection to customers and things like that, and that's all great, and I think it's good to have and maintain a good level of autonomy, but the benefits of a producers cooperative is that actually this work can be done much more collaboratively, and it can actually take some of the burden off growers and farmers that are already doing so much. So doing all that work would be a lot. And furthermore, it can actually allow people to access things like supplying food to institutions, councils, schools, things that we might not be able to access on our own or in isolation, but ways we can kind of do it as a much more broader strategy. And also there are lots of new entrants coming into farming that would struggle to find an outlet, but if they can be linked to a growing producers cooperative that can just link it to a bigger a veg box scheme or a regional market or something like that, then it provides a way in for those people, so it makes it a much more attractive livelihood. Yeah, so that's the producers cooperative kind of joins these dots to actually link these people together. So you can imagine being able to source a whole range of foods, not just vegetables, but we're looking at sort of local grain cooperatives, mushrooms, nuts, more perennial crops, being able to kind of source a range of these things through a producers cooperative, rather than people just going to the supermarkets or going to that. Because a lot of people will still be entangled in the global industrial food system unless there's a real alternative to actually get a whole range of foods year round. And that's only possible through collaboration unless you're going to have huge, big scale commodity farms. So the second action branch is about this land access issue. So access to land, actually securing land for regeneration, and not just for growing, but also for appropriate projects and like community projects and bringing communities back to the land. Some parts possibly rewilding or like nutteries or a whole range of things basically. So not just talk about vegetable growing or growing, but we're looking at access to land for a whole range of land-based enterprises or land-based regeneration. And there's mapping work and things that have been done already to kind of give good pointers towards that. So this will secure parcels of land through fundraising, membership and investment, and we'll go into a bit more of how that might look. And there's a good model with the ecological land cooperative. They sort of secure areas of land. It might be 15, 20 acres. They'll split them up into parcels for example, for new entrant growers. There might be 3 enterprises on a parcel. There might be a flower farm, a vegetable farm, and mushroom growing or tool making, and they all share space. The land cooperative sets them up with the secure tenure, but also with the spaces and infrastructure required. And the idea is there's a symbiotic sort of relationships within that enables those growers and sub-enterprises to thrive. So that's one model, and there's lots of other good models for kind of how land trusts can get this access to land. And also it will work with the other cogs in this whole picture to ensure there's this, there are actually the land workers and the kind of other parts of the jigsaw to link to this. So the land workers group, so everyone familiar with the Land Workers Alliance? In the room? Anyone not?
No.
So the Land Workers Alliance is kind of the UK-wide movement that's also part of La Via Campesina, which is the more global kind of agroecological food sovereignty movement. It's kind of all about these issues, but Land Workers Alliance operates across the UK. So the proposal here is for Avon land workers to complement that existing work, but also have a regional level where we can really tangibly collaborate and make a difference in our bioregion. So it's to link with all the aspects of policy, advocacy, legal, planning, structures, all of these things that are currently supporting business as usual in the degenerative paradigm, and really flip them around through real engagement with that. And starting, in this place and region, but connecting up to a whole web of things across the country and with La Via Campesina more globally. So it's not ignoring these kind of wider systems, but it's bringing the action back to a localised regional level. So this would be kind of, I'd imagine, a non-profit organisation that more acts as the kind of advocacy and systemic level voice. And this will, this could really have a lot of benefits for both the producers network and all of these new emerging growers, but also link together all of the wider work and food organisations that are involved in this work, sort of more as a movement rather than lots of sort of individual things happening. And this will also lead on the training branch, and sort of linking up all of these farms that might be doing their own trainees or traineeships and kind of link them together in a structured way to have it as, accredited apprenticeships, viable access to that education and to those skills, whether it's for sort of short term or for more longer term livelihoods. So I'm going to split up into those groups in a minute. Just going to end on that Buckminster Fuller quote. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So that's this kind of prefigurative idea of what this is all about. It's about creating the new systems and actually getting going in our bioregion right now, rather than kind of waiting for it to come down from top down, or waiting for people that are already doing it to sort of do more, or things like that. It's about, let's make it happen right now in our bioregion. So we're going to pause there. We're just going to go into those groups. So there's going to be there's the 3 project group branches. Maybe I'll go back to that slide. And if anyone else wants to suggest another group or sort of a part of the proposal that you'd like to discuss, then maybe we can form that group. Yes?
Can you tell us about the projects that are going on locally?
Yes. How long have we got? All of them.
Because I don't know.
So locally to here, does anyone want to shout out some? There's lots of people involved in them here. Projects. Babog?
Bristol Organic Growers Group.
Yeah, there's Transition Bath, there's Dry Arch Growers, there's lots of community growing schemes. So I'm from Middle Ground Growers, there's a few others in the room. So we're a sort of ecological farm on the edge of Bath. Grown Green at Hartley Farm, there's Averley Orchards, there's...
We're planting a new orchard, yeah.
There we go, planting the orchard. Yeah, at Bradford and Avon. So there's, lots going on. You can send some follow-up info on that. Yeah, loads of existing work.
There's also there have been mentoring schemes in the past as well, run by Landmarks Alliance and the Organic Growers Alliance, others. There's also a coaching, a DEFRA funded coaching programme that's in southwest and southeast, located at the moment. So in the growers world, of which I'm one, there's lots of bits going on that can link up with these ideas quite well, I think.
I wanted to say that I
Yeah.
work at Bath City Farm, and there's been increasing amounts of funding available from local authorities and NHS clinical commissioning groups to engage people in land work in a way that regenerates people and land.
Yeah.
It's another sort of
Yeah.
just a stream I'm particularly
Yeah.
interested in.
Great, yeah.
Question, Hamish.
Yeah, go for it.
This looks, an important kind of way of thinking about it. I'm just wondering, the Avon bioregion you put on the map is pretty big, and there's a lot going on in certainly Bristol, wherever. And you've obviously been talking to a lot of people, and I'm wondering, how does this reflect what might be, for want of a better term, sort of quick wins, the next steps that everybody's kind of going with this, so that you're really connecting with other people's kind of emergent needs as well.
Yeah, so the sort of the broader vision to link it to the bioregional level and the kind of Avon, it's kind of the long term, and but to actually systematically kind of link up all of that work in that area will be a matter of years and decades and things like that. So it's focused on kind of modelling the change, starting where we are here, probably in Bath, because some of it's already begun. That's sort of where I'm familiar with the most with the context as well. And then we've kind of started discussing with people in Bristol, like Bristol food producers, with Steph and with other people there, to kind of then explore, okay, how does it then link up to those areas? Hello, welcome. There's a few chairs in here. We might do a few more questions at the end as well. I'm quite keen to get into discussion groups, but maybe one more from Heather.
It's just relevant.
Yeah.
The local groups already exist. Is there any formal map, like a database map or something? So, I still don't know. I've already heard of the group that I wasn't aware of. A couple of things.
Can I answer that with there's something called Bath Area Growers, which I'm supposed to coordinate, and I have lapsed miserably over recent months. But I am going to pick it up and get it into better shape very soon. There is a website, Bath Area Growers.
Yeah.
But talk to me and I'll give you contact.
Could I just add to...
So I was just going to say that there's obviously local place and so on, But I think to an extent you have to work with where the systems are. So for things like training and skills, those budgets are with WECA. So that's where we go, hopefully in partnership with Bristol people.
Yeah, so the
Whereas
Avon,
other things are very much based.
yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, so there's the systems currently and the maps and boundaries that are currently in place do feed into a lot of the things like policy and stuff like that. And actually, the Avon bioregion is broadly the WECA, the West of England Combined Authority area. So that's what's kind of like, we're not starting from that, we're starting from like, you know, nature and where that Avon catchment area is. But it so happens to fit into WECA, which is convenient. And then Baines is our most local one to here, but there's also Bristol Council and things like that. So it'll be engaging on all those levels. It's the kind of broader part of it. Yeah,
Sorry,
last one, and then we'll go into
I
groups.
just add from my experience in the area. I quite like this regional area. I work on another farm in Warminster, so I'm interested in that. I talked to growers in Froome. We're in Bradford and Avon. Bradford and Avon doesn't have a lot of young people. It's safe by the canal, but we engage with young people a lot from Bristol, Bath and Bristol, so getting them out there. Various WhatsApp groups, we're talking together for, say, sourcing seed potatoes, compost. I'm talking to people south of Bristol, I'm talking to people in Froome. So yeah, I think that it is, for my personal story, that regional area is relevant. And I've looked for funding recently to get these people to travel. For example, the young students from Bristol, and we didn't get a lot of funding interest coming back, but I'm sorry to say that one of the local groups that did wasn't interested in funding young people coming out from Bristol because they wanted the funding just to go to people in the Bradford and Avon area. So I can see their point of view, but the young people in Bradford and Avon don't necessarily want to come to the farm. The young people from Bristol do. So yeah, there's relevance there.
Yeah, thanks for that. Cool. So we're going to go into some groups. Also, quick to mention, there's mystery post-its on your chairs. You're probably wondering what you're probably sat on or maybe aware of. There's a few pens knocking around. So at any time throughout the session, you can just write whether it's like an idea or a feedback. Or something to input, or an existing group, or skill, or knowledge, you can put it on the post-it note and stick it on the front table, and then we'll get them all together at the end. So put your post-its any time through the session, just put them on the front table. If anything, sort of comments or things on this, or things to bring to it, you can leave, if you want to leave contact details or anything relevant, or a group's name, then just put it there, put it on the table, any point in the session. There's a few pens knocking around, but give me a shout if you don't have one. So bring your post-its with you. And we're going to go into 3 groups, maybe another group if there's any other things as well. Sorry?
I want to go to 2 groups.
Yeah, maybe you can sort of traverse between the 2 and change teams. So just a quick guide. So have a think about which group you'd like kind of have an interest in. Or you might want to go around flirt with all 3. But how many are broadly wanting to look at the kind of access to land and land trust and the kind of landscape thing? Pop your hand up if interested in that. A few more. Go on. Oh yeah.
Can you say again, just briefly?
Yeah. So the land trust is really looking at setting up kind of like a land trust for this region. So for example, like when opportunities come up, for example, there's a farm that comes up for sale. Instead of it going to big corporate things or land grabbing, we buy it out as a community through. I'll go into the funding a bit later, but through the magic money pot. But through a land trust, you like set up legally and things to do that. So it's one way. Community land trust is one way to kind of get more access to land, and it might be also just leasing a plot for a new entrant to come onto, things like that.
Could I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Clarify a question about your idea about the land trust.
Yeah.
Would the land trust in a sense also be a forum for making decisions about how the land should be used? So what the balance of housing, energy, food, all of that, so that we get a kind of good balance for the whole community? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I think potentially, yeah. One of the benefits of the land trust is they can provide a bit of expertise and experience in the area. So, for example, they can help the new entrant farmer, like get planning, develop a good plan for the site, which is actually ecological and economical and viable, and feed into those systems as well. They might have more like, in terms of like the land, the best use of the land, that might come from other frameworks and mapping, and what the community needs, and lots of surveying and stuff like that. But the land trust is probably set up to facilitate that and take a bit of that burden off. For example, a group wanting to do something on the land, or help them with that and facilitate that. So anyone for the land trust, saw the hands up. Maybe come over to this corner down here. Cool.